Thanks for joining us. Today, we're breaking down what it takes to build AI that meets regulatory expectations and actually earns trust. It's about giving financial institutions a clear, practical path to adopting generative AI safely. We know AI can make your processes faster and your reporting cleaner, but you might be worried that it could compromise systems or expose you to new risk. With the right checks and controls, what once felt like a risk is now an opportunity. All of those myths fall into three categories: regulation, compliance, and readiness. And we'll boil down the essential insights for each. I'm joined by Bruno Lorenzelli, founder of Scalata and Exchange Robotics. Bruno, you've spent decades inside global banks, and now you build compliant generative AI for them. You're the perfect person to unpack all of this. Bruno, can you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Tracy, and welcome everyone. Absolutely. I actually, work for banks and financial institutions for almost 20 years, and obviously, I worked before as mostly in IT, experts. I have a computer science background, so when I worked for banks, my experience was always to look at compliance and regulation, whatever you did there, controls, safety nets, and things around basically rules that on the one end were, got a response from the overall, regulatory body through all the crisis that the banking industry has been fundamentally has been through, has been affected to. I can mention MiFID, Sarbanes-Oxley, data protection things, but also the most important thing is that how each bank interprets those rules. So, at some point, I remember during the beginning of the first decade of the of this century, 2000, banks were spending literally billions of dollars just overall changing their own infrastructures and procedures. Now, AI, no one thought at the beginning that needed to respect the same rules. And they just forgot about that. They just went along and built these chatbots and they ingesting or whatever they wanted. Well, you can't do that, really. No, you cannot. And so today they face an incredible thing when you go and check on them. So my experience, I work for the biggest banks in the world, from JP Morgan, Barclays, Standard Chartered Bank, Deutsche Bank. It's been really to build my AI solution, Scalata, ground up for financial institutions. Thinking about one first thing, security, compliance, regulation, controls, making sure that you don't just use a chatbot and you go in and put whatever you want inside it, but actually you have a very cheap, flexible layer that you can build around your rules.
We'll start where every banker starts: regulation, because that is where a lot of AI projects usually stall before they ever get off the ground. Let's address some of those myths. AI adds regulatory risk, and AI introduces new regulatory headaches. Bruno, what do you think of those fears?
Oh, great question, first of all. Yes. So the current, I'd say, the first wave of AI applications for financial institutions were practically unregulated, just for a lack of a better word. So, basically there was no control around it, just chatbots digesting data in whatever system you wanted, Copilot, ChatGPT, Perplexity. You can't do that. I go around the world every day, in different locations, from South America to Europe, US, Asia, and I can tell you that basically they're using unregulated tools all across the board. Now, the implementations around how do I resolve the regulatory, landscape, and that is also very difficult. Why? Because regulation is not in place. Okay. There is only one thing across Europe called, the AI Act. Is not even, in force. It's going to be enforced in 26. So it's about that, the old regulation adapted to AI. Now, there are two rules as well. First of all, we'll talk, also we'll address another thing, who can tell me that I can actually use the knowledge, the brain of my employees and retrain models? Did they sign in my employment agreement something? No, even the regulation, when I hire people, they can sue the bank, they can sue the financial institution. Why? You're basically retraining your own knowledge on top of them. You shouldn't do that. You didn't even ask permission for that. Now, the most important thing is that the regulatory landscape is actually learning and transforming. At the moment, it's very, very worldwide west, I would say. I'd say it's not regulated. Now, banks, most of them are interpreted AI regulation around the current rules of AI data privacy, of their own compliance rules internal to banks, of security rules, and things like this. So it's an interesting thing. And my personal belief is that it should be highly regulated, particularly within banks, okay? But not in a negative way to hamper the development and the explosion of the generative AI technology, but in a positive way to clearly provide not I would say competitive advantages to the current abusers, let's call it abusers to the market, and I believe OpenAI is the first one globally, but to the overall general respect of basically compliance rules and regulatory rules around it.
Regulation is what's required. So now that we can kind of understand that rules are not only going to move AI forward, but they're required to move AI forward. And so the next question is, how do we comply with them? So addressing all of this can be pretty daunting. But Bruno, you've started building generative AI for banks. And where does compliance begin?
So, in essence, when I started to build and design my application, and obviously the focus was in general for financial institutions, and that's the challenge that others obviously are facing at the moment because they didn't really build it for financial institutions. They built it for, to build just generative AI, either application platforms of chatbots for the general public, and now they are converging to that, was obviously to build, a data governance framework. So to build, a framework, a control framework to enable, an easy setup and access to obviously implement your policy rules within financial institutions, whether it is a data privacy policy, whether it is, I would say, transaction control checks, whether it's what we're calling compliance 4eyes review and things like that. So in our data governance framework, we set up the whole thing with two building blocks. One, roles, specific roles determined within the banks that are very easy. And roles, I also kind of refer to deploying your specific departmental information barriers, organizational views, specifically around, controls from the top to the bottom, and around that, rules, what is called rules. So there are two building blocks, the roles and the rules. The rules meaning that I set up specific banking rules. Today, if you use a home banking app and you are the omnibus account, so the one in control, you set up the rules. It's very easy. Obviously, it's very clunky, it's clickable, it's not generative AI, and it's been obviously developed, with millions of US dollars to develop this banking infrastructure. We build exactly the same thing in a Gen AI way. Okay, so you build your permissions, your controls, your rules around that. Now, that was my first, really, I would say, a building block that I built. Around that, we build what is called a data access and data control layer, a data marketplace, which obviously is governed by this data governance framework. Now, within this data governance framework, you can then implement your policies. It's very easy to implement your policies, okay? And you can have evidence without building the system, which also is costly. You can provide evidence that this is respecting the rules. Now, where are we going? Why basically only today we are facing this? Why? Because the agentic technology, what we call agents, are actually, the new way of implementing the workflow around that, the workflow that determines obviously these, rules. And so it's becoming more and more relevant. Why? Because people are actually integrating in a very non-constructive way these controls around the agents, whereas these controls should be at agents level. For instance, in our framework, when we build the agent framework, when you build agents, you need to have an internal policy. So like policy rules, okay? And each agent that you deploy needs to have what is called the guardrails, the controls of that policy. We're talking about codes, Python codes that have guardrails respecting rules of a policy written with prompts, okay? So in Scalata, we did exactly this. We don't just provide that kind of app, but also that kind of a data guardrail, but also at each agent implementation, you can determine your specific policies.
So let's take a look of what regulation and compliance and readiness can actually look like inside of a generative AI platform for a financial institution. So Bruno, walk us through how Scalata.ai works inside a big bank.
Perfectly. And I anticipated a little bit more. The way Scalata works inside banks is that at first level, we have the general account that is called the owner, okay, or the omnibus account that is usually covered by, the chief information officer, chief security officer, or CTO. And he has a data governance framework where he set up, specific, departments, rules, controls. He obviously invites users, connects the API, allocates quotas, budgets, and implements the rules, the policies around that. And it's very easy. It's all in front of you, and it doesn't need any implementation in terms of cost. So you basically onboard users, you set up rules and permissions about what they cannot do. You connect to models, to data providers, to specific, system, backend system, and then you provide permission controls around, what they cannot do. And so this easy, if you like, scenario can provide, fundamentally 5 incredible achievements. One is that the data doesn't leave the organization. You're not gonna, basically retrain models. Our codes and data is not basically sent to external LLMs. Okay, we just ask for specific, instructions or codes, and everything is run in-house. 2, an organization can even choose to actually work on their own platforms directly, use Scalata just as a transformer layer, okay, with our orchestrational tools of agentic AI. The most important thing is that obviously you have visibility of your compliance framework, and you control the entire governance at any point, and you put alerts around that. Now, this is the foundation of our platform.
Before we wrap up, Bruno, do you want to share the easiest way for people to connect here with us one-on-one to see how they can use this inside their own institution?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So the best way
we'll put it in the chat.
We put it in the chat. So basically, we provide you details on our kind of a demo and meeting request, but you can just come here. I'll just give you if you connect with us here, we can ask for a demo, or within the demo, obviously, you will receive your data, or we'll send you a LinkedIn, a HubSpot meeting request, so you can book a meeting with us.
And we love your input on future webinars. So we have a few different things up on this poll, other topics that we can really dive into. You can pick more than one, so go ahead and give us your input, and we'd love to have those future webinars for you. So thank you all so much for joining us. Check the chat for the demo link, and we look forward to speaking with your teams one-on-one or seeing you at a future webinar.